All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, Coach J.K. McLeod, and before kicking off today's episode to talk about how to handle setbacks and being able to embrace the pivot when there's any sort of an unplanned interruption in your fitness routine, I first, as always, want to say thank you. Truly thank you for pressing play on the Help Me Understand podcast. I know that you have a lot of different podcast content that you can consume these days. So I truly never take it for granted that you chose to press play on Help Me Understand. If you could do me one favor, if you believe that this particular episode has impacted you or could potentially impact someone that you know, please forward this episode to them, pass it along, and or post on your socials. Instagram is probably where I spend the majority of my time, and tag me. That's really my only ask in working on trying to spread the information that I have to give on the Help Me Understand podcast. All right, so let's go ahead and get into today's topic. And it is a Tuesday episode. And on Tuesdays, we primarily focus on things that are training, nutrition, fitness adjacent for the most part. So with that, also, I will remind you, if you have any particular topics, whether they're training related or not, just really any overall topics, fitness or otherwise, that you would be interested in me doing a deeper dive into, me giving my own perspective as someone who's been in the game professionally for about a decade at this point, and then a few years unprofessionally previous to that, like prior to getting a certification. I am always down to receive any sort of ideas that you have for future episodes. I've actually got a couple of episode ideas in the hopper. Just received a question recently about being able to understand why someone can't necessarily feel a particular body part that they're supposed to be feeling when they're doing a workout. In fact, this particular one was a question about, I've always wondered, why is it that I don't feel my glutes when I do something that's supposed to be a glute focused exercise? So that one's going to be a topic, and a couple of other ones that have come my way. So again, if you've got ideas, definitely shoot those my way. And more likely than not, I'll put it in the queue to handle on a future episode. All right. So as I tend to really like to do, I'd like to give you a little bit of context on where the thought process or the inspiration for this particular episode around being able to really embrace the pivot and handle setbacks, and that's kind of the working title right now, is coming from. We are just finishing up the month of June, and at the time that this particular episode is being recorded and then posted, we are kicking off the month of July. So we, at this point, have hit the halfway mark in the 2025 calendar. And this is a big time in the fitness industry for a lot of messaging around you're at the halfway point in the year. If you look back over the past 6 months, where are you right now in relation to where you wanted to be or where you want to be? It's not manifest that you're not there. So where you want to be by the end of this particular year. And I think that there's a lot of value in putting deadlines in place for particular things, especially for folks who may be very similar to myself, who are all about the long game and the understanding that fitness is a lifelong journey, not something that has a defined finish line. It can be extremely helpful to put particular deadlines in place to achieve particular milestones along the way. Otherwise, I won't self-project. I will say that I find that it can be really easy and almost slip into excuses of not really staying the course and not really staying focused on things, because it can start to turn into what's referred to as drifting instead of really still continuing to row towards a particular goal. So with a lot of that messaging that will come your way, and I very transparently will likely be a part of that particular messaging, because I think that it's a very relevant thing for not only my clients, but a lot of people that I just have these conversations with. I think that it's really relevant because it will hopefully force you to take an inventory of what January through June has looked like for you. And in many instances, there have been some sort of setbacks, challenges, barriers, unforeseen events, and however else you want to frame that have happened over the past 6 months. So those are things that can range anywhere from a sickness, an injury. If you are a parent or a caregiver, maybe of your parents, you perhaps have experienced some sort of challenge there. For the most part, I don't think that I've got much of like a non-adult audience here. And from what the analytics tend to tell me, a majority of the listening audience is over the age of 35. So I'm going to go out on a very, very short limb, like a twig here, and assume that if you're listening to this podcast, you have responsibilities in your life, both to yourself and likely to other humans. And with that comes a lot of unplanned things, unforeseen things, whether they're happening to you or they're happening to other people. So regardless of who you are, over the past 6 months, you likely have gone through a period where you feel like I'm being pretty consistent. I'm eating well. I've been sleeping enough for the most part. I've been training pretty consistently, nothing too out of the ordinary. And then you or someone that someone that you care about, gets hit with some sort of an injury, an illness, a health issue, or something along those particular lines. Maybe your kids start having a bit more difficulty at school or in their extracurricular activities, and you can start to feel like, okay, and this is kind of more related to when you have like an injury or an illness or some sort of a health issue, you can start to feel like you did something wrong. And that's what I really want to tackle today, because the thing that first comes to mind for me is to let you know that this is not your fault. When you have particular setbacks, they're not your fault. And while that may sound like common sense, I have found in working with a number of different people, I don't even know exactly how many at this point, but between one-on-one coaching and also doing consulting in a group format, we're well into the hundreds. I could say thousands, but I don't want to over exaggerate. So let's say in the hundreds, because I want to talk about people that I've actually had some sort of an interaction with. I'm going to tell you that this is a very common thought process to somehow feel like you've done something wrong. And where that belief for me comes from, that people will commonly go through this, is because I think there's this underlying belief, whether it is conscious or subconscious. I believe there's this underlying belief that if I do the right things more often than not, then I will probably avoid these particular injuries. So if I pay attention to my form, I can avoid hurting myself. If I am really focused on primarily eating whole foods, things that are micronutrient rich, I will avoid experiencing some particular type of disease or health issue or anything like that. And this is where I want to remind you that there are certain things that are just going to 100% be out of your control. So this is where sometimes that feeling of almost like a guilt feeling can come into play, where you're thinking, man, well, what did I do something wrong? Is there something I should have done? Man, I knew that I shouldn't have gone as heavy on that particular movement. Man, I just knew I knew like I was probably hitting the Doritos bag maybe a little bit too often, and then maybe this wouldn't have happened. Man, I knew that I should have like been going to bed at a specific time, and then I wouldn't have been as like kind of out of it and making bad decisions, and then one thing leads to another, and maybe that's what's going on, and that affected my immune system, and now I've been knocked out for a number. There's all of these different things that will come up in the conversations that I have with my clients and other people, and I really want to directly address first what I call like the did I do something wrong trap. So that's, for lack of a better way to put it, that's what I'm going to call it, the did I do something wrong trap. And I want to be clear and really address the fact that illness and injury and health issues, they're not signs of failure, or that the healthy habits, however those have been defined for you in your life, that those were wrong or you didn't execute them the way that you were supposed to. particular things happening are just the reality of life. Like our bodies are so complex. There's so many different, literally different moving parts, things like viruses or accidents, and also just the development of particular things that you may just be genetically predisposed to. Those things will happen. So as much as possible, I just want to remind you that a consistent effort will help build resilience, but it doesn't build immunity to any of these particular things from happening. It doesn't mean that if something happens, whether it's injury, sickness, health issue, or anywhere in between, that any of that is your fault. So I really want to encourage you to shift your perspective in understanding that your strength is also in adapting, not just avoiding harm. So just picture if this is something that I just had a conversation with someone about, where we were talking about a particular health issue that they are going through. And as we were talking back and forth, one of the things that they were mentioning was particular treatments that they're going through and how they have felt after these particular treatments. And in this particular case, this is an individual who's going through treatment for the second time because a previous health issue has now resurfaced. So they went through this particular health issue a number of years ago. There was a belief that that particular health issue was no longer a thing. And then they very recently received news that that particular issue has now resurfaced. And so we were having a conversation, and one of the things that they acknowledged was the difference between how their body has responded this time versus how it responded the first time around going through these different rounds of treatments. And we both, throughout that conversation, were talking about, wow, like what a difference to be in a position where your body is responding so much better now than it was before. Could you imagine what it potentially could be like now had you not made very specific dietary changes, very specific exercise changes, they basically revamped their entire lifestyle from the first time that there was an occurrence of this particular issue to this particular time. And that's just something that's definitely, for lack of a better way to put it, like that's something that's definitely played a role in developing my point of view and my belief on the importance of fitness being part of your lifestyle. And when I say fitness, I'm talking not just physical movement. I'm also talking about eating well, sleeping enough, and also, of course, exercising regularly. Those are really like those three pillars that I include in fitness. And so when you have a focus on that, it's something that I truly believe is not about trying to avoid particular things happening. It's also about being able to build a system that puts you in a position to hopefully be resilient were anything to happen. That is the second thing that I wanted to share with you here too, is really going from this thought process of, okay, did I do something wrong? Like you work through that. And then at some point there needs to be a shift. And when you have that shift in perspective, one of the things that I really strongly encourage you to do is also think about being able to redefine what fitness actually means for you. So it needs to be something that's beyond just particular metrics. So when we're talking like really focusing on PRs and exactly how much weight you lift or how much body fat you do or don't have, those are metrics. And I really believe that fitness, in order to play the long game and have it develop as a lifestyle and develop resilience, it is about understanding the ability to adapt to particular environments and particular situations. I believe that that's a part of fitness too. And I believe that just being aware of particular signals that your body is sending you. So I think being better able to interpret particular pieces of biofeedback. So understanding your energy levels, understanding the proper amount of sleep that you need, understanding how to navigate the highs and the lows. Like I believe that that's also part of fitness too. So thinking about just your adaptability, like how can you make adjustments with your routine and your mindset? How well do you develop a sense of resilience? So being able to bounce back from particular things, and just again, like overall self-awareness. And of course, like performance is going to be an aspect of your overall fitness. So after you've gone through, or as you are going through that period of thinking, man, did I do something wrong? That's why something happened? I'm not going to say it's like, okay, well, once you get through that, then move to this next thing. What I would say is acknowledge that you're feeling these feelings of guilt, and then also start to work towards the next phase of, okay, well, let me just really think about, okay, what does fitness actually mean for me? And what is it beyond how much weight I can lift and how much body fat I do or don't have? So thinking about those particular things. I do think also it is extremely important to really just understand all of the different, not understand, acknowledge all of the different emotions that you are going to have as you're going through this period of making the adjustments, making the pivots, and handling these particular setbacks. That at some point, again, you're adults that are listening to this, at some point, these things are likely going to happen to you or to someone that you actually care about. So even if you've stuck with me this long and you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't really relate because I'm not going through this. If you're in the 35 plus range, no doubt you know somebody who is experiencing something similar to what I've been talking about here. So acknowledge those particular emotions, things like frustration. There can be sadness, there can be anger, there can be fear. Like all of these things are pretty normal responses to losing a particular routine. And especially if you consider yourself to be someone where fitness is part of your identity. What I'm not here to do is argue with you that fitness shouldn't be a big part of your identity, or you're making the gym too much of your personality or anything like that. Like, miss me with all that right now, because that's not really the focus. I just want to let you know that the different emotions that you're feeling, those things are absolutely okay. It's all right to feel those particular emotions. Now, allow yourself to feel those particular things, and then I want to challenge you to start shifting your focus from what you've lost to what you now can control. And this is something I was telling you about, a conversation that I had with someone recently who's going through something, and something that we discussed was being able to utilize this particular time frame as an opportunity to basically reposition particular things. So it's like, okay, well, this particular thing is going on. So yeah, let's keep it real. It is going to remove training from the equation for quite some time, most likely. What you're going through right now, what she shared is, there's just some days that I feel great, and there's some days I feel zapped. And so what we talked about is that as she's experiencing this, she will now need to pivot, training being a very small percentage of what she does as far as like actually lifting at home. That'll be a very small percentage of what she does. And also that time is still that time. And fortunately for her, she still feels pretty good about getting up around the same time. So she's taking that particular time to now pivot it towards being more intentional about meal planning, being more intentional about taking some alone time in the morning to read and journal, listen to a podcast, still has enough energy to go for walks. So different things like that. So allow yourself to really feel what you feel, and then just start to shift your perspective more towards what you actually still have control for. So the words patience and self-compassion are what really come to mind for me. So I do, as we're closing things out here, as I'm bringing the car back into the garage, or landing the plane, as the corporate speak goes, I want to talk to you about a few things that I jotted down that I believe are what we'll call like practical pivots. Came up with this little catchphrase and then I jumbled it. So here are some practical pivots. Let's call them some actionable tips, because we start this whole thing off with, hey, I get it. Like this thing has happened. This is what you're going through, and you're going to feel all the feelings and, all the motivation of, hey, you can do it. Like you can keep going. Okay, that's fantastic. And then after that whole speech is over, after the YouTube motivational video is over, you are going to turn the thing off, or turn this podcast off, and you got to go live your actual life. That's where things really start to get messy. And that's where that that motivation, that dopamine hit is no longer there. So I want to talk to you about 3 or 4 things that you specifically can focus on as your practical pivots when you experience some sort of a setback. So first, let's talk about moving within the limits that you have. So first, make sure that you have consulted a professional. For my clients, whether they're one-on-one or people that I'm working with in a group, if we are experiencing particular things, injuries, illness, sickness that is outside of my scope of understanding, and especially if we are at a point where first something hasn't specifically been diagnosed, always say consult with a professional. And during that particular time, we will work through things that are pretty gentle movement. So things like stretching, walking. And then once we've got some sort of a protocol from the treating professional, then we'll work on rehabilitation stuff. So a big thing is move within limits and really focus on what's possible. I'm not saying to ignore that you have limitations. It's an understanding of, okay, I understand what the limitations are. And unless you're telling me that I have to stay in bed 24 hours, there is something that I can do. And the natural thing as well as that's not enough or that's not going to be that much. It's something. So let's roll with that, because I believe that that's something that can be and is a benefit both physically and mentally. Second, great time, best time to re-engage and refocus around proper nutrition to support your healing. So being able to really prioritize nutrient dense foods. So this is where you can potentially, if you're someone who tends to be more macro focused, so you tend to be more focused on, okay, I'm going to get in, generally this much protein, generally this many grams of carbs, generally this many grams of fat. Don't lose the focus on that. Let's also dig into what does your micronutrient focus look like? So are you getting in nutrient dense foods that still force your body to process those particular foods in order to get the nutrients from them? So the difference between like a sweet potato versus sweet potato chips, one is going to be much more processed than the other. I'm not saying one is better or worse overall. What I am saying is one is going to be much more micronutrient focused than the other. By focusing on foods that are nutrient dense, micronutrient dense, then you give your body the opportunity to do its thing and work the processes that it needs in order to get the advantage and optimize the nutrients that you've just intake that you've just eaten. Let's just keep it simple. Also, we can't forget about hydration. So nutrient dense foods and hydration to actually support your recovery. Very important. I've just got a couple more here. Sleep, definitely sleep, big priority there. So this is a great time, again, to re-engage and refocus and reinforce sleep as really the ultimate recovery tool for body repair and rehabilitation. So if you are experiencing any sort of illness, setback, health issue, that sort of a thing, understand that especially depending on the severity of the treatment that you are going through, then no shame in focusing on sleep, repair, recovery, because a lot of times that's really where the magic happens. Then last but surely not least, I jotted down mental and emotional support. So work to either stay connected or get involved with a community, some place where there is someone or someones, some people who have some level of relatability to some of the things that you're going through. If you've been a listener for a while, you may remember some episodes back where I had my friend Maggie Lakebrink on the show, who shared her own journey in dealing with breast cancer. And one of the things that she talked about was the importance of finding a supportive community for her. Maggie, at the time that she was diagnosed, was given particular brochures and a support group to go to by the medical facility that she was getting her treatment from. And I remember her saying that when she walked into the meeting that they had suggested, she just didn't find that there were a lot of people there specifically that could relate to her because they were sometimes like twice her age. So she was able to do the work to find a supportive community, I believe online, that she found that was able to support her. So I just use that as an example to say, like, you may likely have to do some work in order to reach out and find people that can be supportive. And still, I believe that it's definitely worth it as far as being able to focus on the mental and emotional support that you need. So find a community, engage in hobbies that still bring you joy. Maybe it's a time where there are different things that you perhaps get involved in, just based on the nature of what limitations you may have. If the gym is no longer something that you can get to right now, so not forever. If you can't get to the gym right now and it's not something that's advised right now, what are some other areas that you can dig into and other interests that you have that you can really pour into? And then always seek professional help if you need it. So as far as counseling, therapy, and all things in between, good thing to make sure that you've always got in your corner. So to wrap this up, I just, again, really want to reiterate that if you are someone who has experienced a setback in terms of health, an injury, illness, any of those particular things, anything in between, I want to really encourage you to know that this is a temporary chapter. Certainly, I don't believe that my brand, my reputation is all about trying to sell you a load of like the toxic positivity of it's just a temporary thing, so that means it's going to be over quick. No, that could be a super long chapter. I will acknowledge that for you. There are particular injuries and illnesses and health conditions that can be long lasting. However, even with that, it doesn't mean that it has to be the end of your fitness journey. It can be a detour that really leads to growth in the next phase. So these particular things that happen many times can be difficult because they start to expose and reveal some underlying issues that maybe we haven't addressed in quite some time. And this can be a time to redirect, re-engage, and refocus on those particular things so that when you do come back, you come back stronger, come back more resilient, and certainly maybe even more balanced than you were before because you've had the time, you've now created the time that maybe was not previously there from your point of view, and you've bolstered up some other things to make those things stronger for when you do return back to or when you return to a different routine, including physical fitness in that particular routine. Also want to make sure that you take the time to celebrate when you come back. Okay. And when I say come back, what I'm talking about is reintroducing particular things. I'm not really a big fan. I'm not a fan at all of trying to tell people to get back to a former version of themselves or get their whatever body back. That's just not really my brand. Like, shout out to anybody who, like, that's your thing. That's cool. It's just not something that really aligns with how I prefer to coach and support and collaborate with people. I am all good with acknowledging previous achievements, previous versions of yourself, and utilizing those as information, and then continuing to move the ball forward, understanding the rules of the game might just be different now. So let's just go ahead and close things out with, again, just understanding a setback it's part of the human experience. It's not a specific judgment on your worth. You are not broken. All right. So I want to encourage you really to embrace the pivot, be kind to yourself, have self-compassion. Your dedication is going to see you through. And with that, we're going to close out today's episode. So if you've listened this long, I truly appreciate it. If you could and feel so inclined to leave a rating and or review on whatever platform you're listening to this on, I would sincerely appreciate that. So again, thank you for listening to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I hope this helps. Take care.